Chapter 2, Section 5, Ratification and the Bill of Rights. I will begin this chapter by talking about the two groups that formed during the Articles of Confederation into the Constitution, and that is the Anti Federalists and the Federalists. Now, although not necessarily political parties of the time, they did assume the role of what would become the antithesis of one another. The Anti Federalists, you can say, were for a small government. They were for state rights, led by Thomas Jefferson. He believed that they should be an agrarian farm economy. So basically, he thought everyone in America should be farmers. Then on the other side, you have the Federalists, and these were your big farms. These were your big business. These were your artisans. These were the people who had skill sets, and they were the rich. And they believed in a strong central government that basically protected everyone's rights, but ran the country in a new way. Although the Anti Federalists were for a strong national government, they believed what the Constitution represented went against the ideals of why they fought the American Revolution. And they went on to believe that the national government itself would become more powerful and more stronger than what the King of England was. And this, of course, then would be an assault on their own liberty in the United States. The biggest criticism of the new Constitution by the Anti Federalists revolved around one thing that every state had given its people, and that was a Constitution with a Bill of Rights. So now we're giving a central government all the power, and it's going to be an umbrella power over the states. Then that umbrella power should cover a Bill of Rights. So let's take a look here at what the Anti Federalists wanted. We know the Anti Federalists liked the Articles of Confederation. We also know that the Anti Federalists opposed and feared a strong national government because they didn't want to have the same government they had under the king. They also believed that the way the Constitution was written, that it favored the wealthy. And of course, as I said already, it lacked a Bill of Rights. And the major thing that we have here is that the Anti Federalists opposed any omission of the word God from all major documents, which will be contrary to what the Federalists will want to believe in. They also believe that each state should be an individual country and act as a small republic within itself. So these are all the different things that the Anti Federalists want. Let's now take a look at what the Federalists wanted. So the Federalists were enthusiastic supporters of the new Constitution because it was powerful and more vigorous in dealing with the issues that had presented itself under the Articles of Confederation. And the only thing that really the Federalists were concerned with was that the Articles of Confederation were too weak. And so you couldn't sustain a new country with a weak government. And with the 13 states acting individually, oh, that was very fragile in itself. The Federalists, in an effort to promote themselves, were quick to point out that the new Constitution separated the branches and that each branch would have a check on each other. So, who were the Federalists and what did they believe in? Well, let's take a look here. One, the Articles were weak and ineffective. We know that. States didn't get along well with one another. They couldn't tax as a government. Number two, the national government's stronger to function. If you didn't have a strong national government, then the states would have fallen apart. You needed to sort of like a parent here controlling those uncooperative children. They believed that men of experience and talent should be the governors, just not anyone, which goes against what we believe in today. But again, if you are educated and you have property and you are in politics, then you know what's going on. The Federalists also believed in taking care of the people. Although they didn't have a Bill of Rights initially, they did believe that through state constitutions, that the federal government would back those up. They also believed in a separation of church and state. So we'll talk more about this in the upcoming chapters, but this will be a point of contention from this point forward. And lastly, they got their support from businesses, large farmers, and of course merchants. Now you write this new government and you need to get the word out. So how do you get the word out to everybody so that they're on board with you? Well, what happened was three men, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison, who are collectively known by the name Publius. And of course, Publius, if you go back to your world history, you'll know where Publius stands. And of course, that was the Romans. But anyhow, these were a series of essays that defended the Constitution, and there were 85 of these, and each one of them dealt with one different branch of government, and they put these into words that everyone could understand in the colonies, and people are now becoming more educated, and they're reading these, and those who aren't, they're having them read to them. So there's a fire and a fever going around I say colonies, but the states over what this new government should look like. But with every point comes a counterpoint. And in this case, the Anti Federalists also wrote their own papers. And Thomas Jefferson led this push, and they penned their names under Brutus and Federal Farmer. Now, again, think about why they're not using their real names. They're using fictitious names, even though people know who they are, that they don't want to be associated with one particular set brand. And the Anti Federalist essays were more about protecting liberty in most of their essays. And so they would counterpoint whatever the Federalist papers were. And you can see here, here's a quote that I put: "There are certain unalienable and fundamental rights which, in forming the social compact, ought to be explicitly ascertained and fixed. Hence, what they're asking for is a Bill of Rights." So, how do you ratify this? How do you get this out there? Under the Articles of Confederation, you needed 13 of 13 states to approve changes. Now we're saying you only need 9 of 13. So the constitutional framers targeted the smaller states and lured them with the fact that they had equal representation in the Senate. And the small states were quick to ratify it. I mean, why wouldn't you? Again, you go back to our compromise. You go back to small state, large state, and the Connecticut Compromise. So Delaware is going to be the first state to approve this Constitution. And ironically, Delaware was once part of Pennsylvania. Now, the larger states are going to take a little bit of time. But if you look at this a quote that I have here from Patrick Henry: "My political curiosity leads me to ask, who authorized them to speak of the language 'we the people' instead of 'we the states'?" And that leads us back to the father of the Constitution, James Madison. James Madison's going to sit down and write the first 12 amendments. Now, I say here past 10, the First Amendment dealt with representation, and that one is still on the books today, folks. It's never been addressed, and it will stay there. The second one um, deals with congressional pay raises. 1789, it wasn't passed until 1992.